Hey guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing Comic Uno's Best Comics of the Week, and this is the show where I review all the comics I've read this week in one show. We go least favorite to best pick of the week and everything in between, and at the end of the video, we talk about the viewer's pick of the week. So in the comments below, let me know your pick of the week for a chance to be featured on the episode. Now let's jump in. I had a pretty average size haul with 13 books, and there's a lot of big books that came out this week, so I'm excited to talk about them. So number 13 for me is Contest of Chaos, Spider-Gwen Annual. I have not been following the Contest of Chaos arc. I read the first issue. It wasn't really for me. It was definitely more just action. The reason I got this is that we don't get a lot of Spider-Gwen content, and I just wanted to see Spider-Gwen, but I don't think you're really missing much here. It is pretty much what those other chapters were like. Fight a character. And something I've been disappointed with Spider-Gwen is that we've really only been getting these Elseworld stories. No actual development for the character. And I think it's a shame once again we're getting that with a one-shot like this that just kind of feels fillerish. And also I don't think the artwork was very strong for something that was so driven by the action. So giving that 1.5 stars, and that is number 13. Moving on to number 12. Honestly, I liked all my books this week, so this is low, but I still enjoyed it, and that is Justice Society of America issue 6. And this issue definitely has more to do with Stargirl. So if you read the Stargirl series that Jeff Johns wrote from a couple of months ago, this heavily ties into that and the children from that island. This issue has to deal with, okay, what happens to those children now that they come back years later and their lives have kind of disappeared from them. And we get a little bit of Huntress in this issue, but not much. She has been the focal point of the series, but not as much in this issue. So overall, I thought it was okay. I think you have to be a heavy fan of that miniseries to really enjoy this one. As someone who enjoyed the miniseries enough, it was cool to see these characters again, but somewhat forgettable. And also the artwork, it's a different artist. It's still nice. It feels very 2000s to me, but I don't think it's as strong as Janen's artwork. So giving that 3 stars, and that is number 12. Moving on to number 11, I was a little surprised that this was lower than I expected, and that is Shazam Issue 3. Shazam is a series that, well, because of pretty much all the Dawn of DC books, because of the Night Terrors book, it stalled, right? You kind of forgot what happened in those first 2 issues, and then you had that 2-month break, and now you're like, okay, we're back, but it was in the middle of an arc, and I feel like this issue kind of lost its momentum because of it. Because it's pretty much a point A to point B issue where Billy can't be Shazam, and we see him deal with the magic side of that, and maybe the family also dealing with the same situation of them not being as, heroic and not having the powers that they used to have. And in that instance, it was cool, but there wasn't anything that is like, whoa, this is such a cool arc. Let's see where this goes. And I don't even think there was a lot of big emotional moments to make it so focused on Billy's transition to what he needs to be for Shazam. But Dan Mora's on art, and the artwork was great for this book. But again, overall, I think it lost a little momentum here. So giving that 3 stars, and that is number 11. All right, moving on to number 10. I liked issue 1 a lot, and I still liked issue 2. But I think this kind of has an issue 2 slump, and that is the Sacrificers issue 2. I enjoyed this issue because we do learn a little bit more about the mythos of these characters. They built them up to be, okay, they're being sacrificed, and they've always known that they're going to be sacrificed to this culture, I guess we'll call it. And now we're actually seeing, okay, so what are they being sacrificed to? Is this a good thing or a bad thing? And it looks like they are getting some goods by the end. But the reason this is a little bit lower is because I feel like there are so many moments to make real bonds between these 4 or 5 characters, but really it's just them arguing throughout the whole issue. It's like, wait, no, this is gonna be it, this is gonna be it. So there wasn't any like big character moments, but I think it was a good issue for the overall mythology and where the plot's going. And the artwork is unique. I like the style. I still really like this book. I think issue 1 was just a little stronger. So giving that 3 stars, and that is number 10. Moving on to number 9. All right, so this is part of the title for this video, and that's Fire and Ice, Welcome to Smallville Issue 1. The title of this video being which one was better. So now you see, at least in the line of me thinking Birds of Prey was better, we'll see how high up it is. Fire and Ice, I don't know anything about these characters. I didn't, in the beginning, they actually tell you a little bit of a summary of them. I'm like, I didn't even know that. I'm like, oh, one of them's a model, one of them's a princess. Did not know that at all. And, you know, in that regard, I like that we're learning about the characters. But I do think this book is definitely more for people who already love Fire and Ice. You're like, oh, cool, they're in Smallville, they're fighting with each other. But what I liked about this issue, and something I'll talk about with Birds of Prey too, it feels very distinct. It feels like it has its own style. I like that it has its own voice, and it gives me enough where I'm like, I'm kind of curious to see where issue 2 is going to go, just because of the world it's already building and the cast it's trying to build. And I like the artwork a lot. I kind of like the cartoony nature of the book, so I'm interested to see where it goes. I didn't love it, but I'm curious for people who really like Fire and Ice if they love this book. But as you can see, I think if you do need to pick up one book, it would be Birds of Prey, and we'll talk about that a little further down the line. All right, moving on to number 8, which is Steelworks Issue 4. So this issue, and this book in general, what I like about it is that it's so ingrained about all of the Superman family. It's not just about Steel, it's not just about Lana, and the villain is kind of tackling all of them, and that's what this issue is about. It's like, okay, Lana's powers are back, and Superboy's powers are being weird, and Steel's trying to figure out how to help them. Is it a mind-blowing issue? No, I don't think the villain is the strongest here, but I like the art. I like the character interaction, and I'm curious to see where it's going to go. I'm having a fun time with this book, and it tends to be a nice middle-of-the-road read. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 8. All right, moving on to number 7. A book I just recently started picking up again, as X-Men Issue 26. Looks like I need to get Iron Man too, because it is a continuation to that book. But Emma's getting married, kind of, and she's, I think, thought to be dead, and now Tony and her are plotting with each other. We got Kingpin in there as well. But what I liked about this issue is that you are dealing with some of the other political drama with the other X-Men, like Shadowcat versus Firestar. Really enjoyed that interaction. Then Firestar saying, hey, the things that you thought happened didn't. And Kitty's like, okay. So I like those moments. I think they fit a lot into this issue. I have not been reading Iron Man. I don't know what's been going on with Emma, so maybe I was a little detached with that, but I think this issue did a pretty good job of explaining what's going on without feeling too lost. And the artwork is solid enough for the book. There's times where I feel like it's maybe a little bit too dark and honestly a little forgettable, but I like the issue. I'm curious to see where it's going to go, and I possibly will get Iron Man to see where it continues, but I'll definitely be continuing with X-Men. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 7. Moving on to number 6, which is Peacemaker Tries Hard, Issue 5. Love this book. If you're looking for a good comedy, this is it. It's Peacemaker trying to save his dog, and along the way, he sees all these different versions of Deathstroke. My favorite being Teen Deathstroke. And I really like the moment where Peacemaker talks about their dads, and maybe what it's like to be a good dad, and how their dads were not that. And I thought there was a really great monologue there, and of course, still having some comedy where he asks Teen Deathstroke, okay, so what do you want to be? And he's like, I want to play video games and dance. He's like, okay, go play video games and dance. And I'm curious to see if we'll ever see these characters again. But I had a fun time with that, and it's a very simple plot. Again, it's Peacemaker trying to save his dog, but there's a lot of good character moments throughout that really make this a fun read with some splendid artwork and facial expressions. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 6. All right, moving on to number 5, which is Silk, Issue 5. This issue is the last of the miniseries that I think has been really, really solid. And I feel like this caps off exactly what this book did well, and very simply. It's a story about her brother feeling left out, feeling like the supporting character, Silk realizing, okay, this is what's wrong with our relationship, let's go on an adventure and figure this out. And by the end, they team up, and he's going to join Team Silk. Again, very simple story. We've seen it before, but it's a good character-driven story that actually develops these characters, where I feel like these miniseries tend to just do like, oh, let's do an Elseworld story, and then next issue or next miniseries, it won't matter, and they're just kind of fun and one and dones. But I like when you get to see some character development and have a reason to pick up these minis, and I feel like Silk has done a good job with that, where the artwork is very similar to what we've seen with Silk in the past too, so it's very easy to jump into. So overall, giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 5. Moving on to number 4, this is actually a little higher than the prelude of this book, and that is Batman issue 137. This is technically part 2 of the Gotham Catwoman war. And I like the ending a lot to this book. I feel like the beginning, I was like, all right, where's this going? It's kind of trying to find its footing. But once you get to Batman versus the Bat Family, you know, you see how nuts he's going and how the Bat Family is teaming up against him. I like this morally gray compass of what Catwoman's trying to do for Gotham and what Batman's trying to do for Gotham. And it's a fun story. Do I know why Vandal Savage shows up in the end? Not really. I'm curious to see where that's going to go. But I like the potential of this book. I'm still not sold that this is the best event ever, but I think there's something here that can be really interesting. And art is it's the same artist that's been working on with Batman, Jorge Jimenez, so that really works well for this book as well. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 4. Moving on to number 3. I'm shocked this is in my top 5 again, but I'm happy. And that is the Amazing Spider-Man issue 33. And I was kind of flip-flopping with this issue to give 4 stars or give it 3.5, but I ended up going with the 4 because it does feel like a classic Kraven the Last Hunt issue where we get to see really the shoe on the other foot. So Spider-Man is trying to hunt Kraven, and trust me, this book reminds you over and over again that this is not Kraven, this is Kraven's son. And we get to see Spider-Man kind of do his thing there. And there's a lot of homages to that original event, to that original story. My nitpicks for this is that I kind of wish there was a little bit more dialogue, maybe a little bit more oomph to the emotional aspect to this. There's some moments in the beginning where Peter has a monologue and then Norman has a monologue. I think that's where it gets to be the strongest. When Kraven talks, he's very repetitive. But I like this issue. This is why it's high, because it's almost simple. It just goes back to its roots, but doing something a little different, reversing the story a little bit. And then also the art is splendid for this book, especially a book that is mostly about a hunt. It's mostly an action issue. So I enjoyed this one. That is why I'm leaning towards the 4 stars for it. So that is number 3 for me. Moving on to number 2, the other part of this video, the other part of this title, which is Birds of Prey issue 1. I thought this is a really, really solid issue. Now, talking about Fire, Ice, and Birds of Prey. Fire and Ice, like I said, I think had a very distinct voice. It felt very different than your Justice League International books you normally see with those characters. It felt a little different than your Superman type story that you would see in Smallville. So I like that, a very distinct voice. Birds of Prey has a very distinct voice, but at the same time is very nostalgic to 2000s Batman, Robin type comics. And that's something I really appreciated. And even from the coloring and just the style of this book, you know it's trying to reminisce to, again, old school Birds of Prey, even the beginnings of Birds of Prey. But what I like is the mishmash of these characters. This issue does a good job and goes out of its way to introduce these characters and tell you why they're here, what their interactions will be like, and what the mission is. It's a really good way to do a team book, because then you're interested in these characters. You're like, okay, I know everyone now. Sometimes team books kind of just throw you into the middle of the battle, and you're like, well, why would Aquaman team up with Donna Troy? I don't know. But I guess this book is letting us do that. But this book goes out of its way to say these personalities are really, really different. And if you don't know anything about these characters, they also kind of introduce these characters if this is your first comic. And there is definitely a big pinpoint of where the story is going. Black Canary's trying to save her sister, Sin, and we get to see maps in the end, which is kind of cool. Maps from the future. So there's also, I'm sure other layers are going to happen here, more than just we got to save Sin in Themyscira of all places. I had a good time with it. You could just tell that Kelly Thompson knows these characters really well. I love Cassandra in this book. I really like Dinah. I really liked Harley. I think she was really interesting. I'm not as big of a fan of Zealot and Big Barda, so I don't know if they did as much for me, but I'm excited to see if, as the series goes on, I could begin to love them. But I thought it was a really solid issue, so go check it out. This is definitely an issue one you should buy, and I'm just curious about the ride. You could tell this is gonna be a run. It's gonna be a run with a distinct voice to tell a true story with these characters. So that is number 2 for me. Moving on to number 1, a book that I was so pleasantly surprised by. I kind of got this book on whim, and that is Kill Your Darlings, issue 1. I feel like every year there's an issue 1 that comes out, and I tell everybody, if you want to write comics, read this book, because it's the perfect issue 1. And this year, so far, it's Kill Your Darlings. It's the perfect issue 1, where we get to see this girl who's fantasizing about whatever, things that kids fantasize about, being a princess, having this mouse as her guard, and we get to see that story develop, and I'm sure that story will become more important. But we have the juxtaposition of her mom struggling with bills, and it doesn't feel generic. They really make you feel for the mom and the daughter, and you have the opening of this witch character who dies because she's at the stake. Maybe she's not actually a witch, but at least a witch trials is happening. You're like, oh, I'm interested to see what that's all about. And then throughout the story, it does such a beautiful job in not throwing exposition at you, but letting you learn about this world. Like, this girl, she has a friend who also is kind of interested in this fantasy world, and by the end, the big moment that you're like, wow, I need issue 2, is that her house burns on fire. You don't really know why. She might be the cause because there's blood in this fantasy world, and it's such a wonderful issue where you just truly care about every character, and you don't know what direction it's going in. You kind of have a sense of what the story is going to be about, but really it could go in any direction. And again, it's the perfect issue 1. I just feel like these characters, I'm already in love with them, and it's just issue 1. I want to see where the story goes. The artwork is so good as it turns from the fantasy to the real world, especially through coloring. It's really a perfect issue. So go check it out. That's my pick of the week. I gave it 5 stars. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite comics were. And last week's viewer pick of the week was Wolverine. And here are some comments about that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno, and I'll see you guys in the next one.